Right now, as you listen to this, you are actually pulling microscopic hackers into your body.
Oh, yeah, with every single breath.
Right. And it's funny to think about, but, you and I, and you listening right now, we all do something about 20,000 times a day without even trying.
Yep, breathing. It's the ultimate background process.
Honestly, it's kind of like binge watching another season of The Office. I mean, you don't consciously decide to let the next episode play.
Right, it just happens automatically while you're sitting there staring at the screen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if the air we're breathing while we just, go about our day is secretly acting like a malicious software update?
That is a terrifying thought.
It really is. What if invisible particles are sneaking in and literally rewriting our body's code?
Well, spoiler alert, they are.
Yeah. Welcome to the Deep Dive Lab. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee, because you're the third person in this conversation today,
Yeah.
and we are unpacking a mind-bending stack of recent scientific papers.
We really are. We're looking at how invisible air pollution, specifically particulate matter, or PM2.5,
The really kindy stuff.
exactly, how it's fundamentally altering human DNA.
Right. And we're going to explore the mechanics of how this happens on a cellular level, plus what it means for lung cancer risk, even in, surprisingly pristine environments.
And we'll get into how artificial intelligence is being deployed to predict this damage before it ever makes us sick.
So let's just jump right into the microscopic world. We are looking at a January 2024 paper published in the journal Frontiers in Genetics.
Right. This was authored by Dulce Maria Gavito Covarrubias, Carla Rubio, and their team.
And they're from the Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla, or BUAP, and Concitepto down in Mexico. Their work really focuses on epigenetics.
Yeah, and epigenetics is really the key to understanding this entire phenomenon because, most people understand basic genetics, right?
You inherit a DNA sequence from your parents.
Exactly, and that sequence is fixed.
So to make this relatable, let's think of your DNA sequence, like the actual A's, C's, T's, and G's, as the written script for a massive Marvel movie.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. The script dictates the dialogue, the characters, the plot. But handing a script to a studio doesn't just automatically create a movie. You need a director.
And the director decides which scenes actually get filmed, which ones get, highlighted with a dramatic close-up, and which ones just get left on the cutting room floor.
So epigenetics is that director.
Yes. It is the biological system that turns certain genes on or off completely without altering the underlying genetic code.
And this is where our villain enters the movie, PM2.5.
Yeah.
We hear this term thrown around in weather apps, but let's really put it in perspective.
Yeah, these are particles so ridiculously tiny that they are about 30 times smaller than the width of a single human hair.
Wow. So when we breathe them in, they don't just get trapped in our nose or our throat mucus like regular dust.
No, they pull an Ant-Man.
They pull an Ant-Man. I love that.
Yeah, they shrink down. Well, they're already small, but they bypass all our body's physical security systems. They sneak deep into the alveoli, which are the tiny air sacs in our lungs.
And then they just slip directly across the lung barrier right into our bloodstream.
Exactly. And once they infiltrate the bloodstream, they circulate throughout the entire body. The researchers at BUAP and Concitepto detailed the chemical chaos these particles cause once they breach our cells.
Right.
The primary mechanism is something called oxidative stress.
Okay, let's unpack this. Oxidative stress. Is that basically like microscopic rust?
That is actually a highly accurate way to visualize it. When these PM2.5 particles enter a cell, they bring along heavy metals and organic compounds that trigger the creation of free radicals.
And free radicals are those unstable molecules missing an electron, right?
Yep. They act like microscopic Tasmanian devils. They tear through the cell architecture, just desperately trying to steal an electron from anything they bump into.
Like proteins or cell membranes?
Or your DNA. And this desperate electron theft is oxidative stress. It is literally cellular rust.
Wow. So is this basically like radiation mutating our genes? Are these free radicals physically scrambling the letters of our Marvel movie script?
What's fascinating here is it doesn't change the underlying DNA sequence. It doesn't mutate the letters at all.
Wait, really? Then what does it do?
What this rust does is physically interfere with the epigenetic directors we were just talking about. It changes how the body reads the script.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, the paper details how this oxidative stress causes specific mechanisms, namely DNA methylation and histone modifications, to just go completely haywire.
Okay, we got to break those two down. DNA methylation and histones.
Hmm.
I'm assuming we aren't talking about the kind of histones you learn about in ancient history class.
Definitely not. So DNA methylation is basically the body's way of placing chemical stop signs on certain genes.
Step signs, got it.
It attaches a methyl group to the DNA, which signals the cellular machinery to just ignore that specific section of the script.
And histones.
Histones are the structural proteins that your DNA wraps around. Think of it almost like thread wrapping around a spool.
Because we have, what, roughly 2 meters of DNA crammed into a microscopic cell nucleus?
Right, it has to be spooled up really tightly to fit.
So if the thread is wrapped too tightly around that spool, the body can't physically access it to read the gene.
Precisely. And PM2.5 exposure causes the cell's machinery to malfunction. It starts placing those methyl stop signs in the completely wrong places.
Oh, no.
Or it wraps the DNA threads so tightly around the histone spools that critical genes get permanently silenced.
And if the gene that gets accidentally silenced by this cellular rust happens to be like a tumor suppressor gene?
Then you have just inadvertently turned off the body's natural defense mechanism against cancer.
Yeah.
The cell starts dividing out of control because the stop dividing instruction has just been hidden from view.
That is terrifying.
It is.
Well,
Or, conversely, the rust might loosen the spool around dangerous genes, accidentally turning on genetic instructions that promote fibrosis, which is severe tissue scarring.
or neurodegeneration.
Right.
Okay, so if this microscopic cellular hacking is accumulating silently inside our bodies for decades, what does it look like when we zoom out? Like, what happens on a massive population-wide level?
That's the million-dollar question.
We need a geographic reality check, which brings us to an October 2025 study published in the British Journal of Cancer.
Yes. This was led by Rowan A.M. Alfatab, Daniel R.S. Middleton, and their colleagues from Queen's University Belfast.
And the setting for this study is critical to why the findings are so alarming.
Yeah.
They conducted this research in Northern Ireland.
Right.
Hold on, Northern Ireland. Because when I think of PM2.5 pollution, I picture, like, smog-choked dystopian cityscapes. I picture industrial smokestacks.
Sure, most people do.
I do not picture Northern Ireland. That's rolling green hills and ocean breezes. Honestly, I picture the lush, idyllic Shire from Lord of the Rings. How can they have a pollution problem?
Well, Northern Ireland is relatively clean compared to heavily industrialized global megacities. It broadly meets many standard air quality targets. But the researchers used the Northern Ireland Cancer Registry to map PM2.5 exposure for thousands of individuals over an 8-year period. And rather than relying on a couple of generalized air monitors for an entire city or county...
Which is what they usually do, right?
Yeah, but here they mapped the exposure at a highly specific 1 square kilometer resolution.
Wow. Why does a 1 kilometer resolution matter so much? Does the air really change that drastically from one neighborhood to the next?
Drastically. A citywide average is practically useless for a personalized risk assessment. I mean, if you live in a valley where wood smoke settles in the winter, or if your apartment is located 50 yards from a major traffic intersection where diesel trucks idle, your personal PM2.5 exposure is astronomically higher than someone living just 2 kilometers away near a park.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So by pinpointing the air quality practically right outside people's front doors, what did they find?
They found a startling correlation.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Even in this clean environment, the Shire, people living in the highest PM2.5 tier had a 37% increased risk of developing lung cancer compared to those in the lowest tier.
A 37% increase. In a demographic area that most people would assume is completely safe from severe pollution.
It completely shatters the illusion that air pollution is only a threat in places where you can physically see the smog hanging in the air.
It really does.
But the twist in this data is even wilder, because this study didn't just find a blanket 37% increase across the board. When they broke the demographic data down, the association was heavily skewed.
Very heavily.
Women in that highest PM2.5 tier saw a massive 79% increased risk of lung cancer. Meanwhile, the effect was barely even detected in the male cohort.
Yeah, that was a huge finding.
Wait, 79%? Why women? Are female lungs biologically different, or is there something else going on?
So the Queen's University Belfast team proposed several nuanced hypotheses for this vast disparity. One biological theory involves endogenous estrogen.
Endogenous just means hormones produced naturally by the body, right?
Correct. There is emerging evidence that natural estrogen may interact synergistically with the heavy metals and organic compounds carried by PM2.5 particles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, essentially amplifying that oxidative stress rust we discussed earlier.
That is wild.
And there are also differences in airway architecture. On average, women have slightly smaller lungs and narrower airways than men.
Which might lead to a higher localized deposition of these tiny particles.
Exactly. A higher concentration of microscopic hackers per square inch of lung tissue.
But wait, you mentioned demographic factors earlier when we were talking about that 1 kilometer mapping. Does behavior play into this?
It is a major variable. The exposure in the study was mapped to residential addresses.
Okay.
So historically, and depending on the specific employment demographics of this Northern Irish cohort over that 8-year period, women might have spent significantly more time at or near their residential locations.
Compared to men, who might have commuted further away for work. Meaning, the residential 1 kilometer map was just a far more accurate reflection of what the women were actually breathing 20,000 times a day.
Exactly. Whereas the men were out of that specific grid for 8 to 10 hours a day. It really highlights the massive complexity of environmental health data.
Absolutely.
And the type of lung cancer they observed also provides a massive clue. This specific type of PM2.5 pollution drives a subtype of lung cancer called adenocarcinoma.
Okay, how does that differ from the lung cancer we usually hear about with heavy smokers?
So smokers typically develop squamous cell carcinoma, which tends to form in the central major airways of the lungs where the heavy smoke hits first.
Right, that makes sense.
Adenocarcinoma is increasingly dominant worldwide, especially in non-smokers and women. It originates deep in the extreme periphery of the lungs.
Which is exactly where those tiny PM2.5 Ant-Man particles end up lodging themselves, because they're small enough to bypass the central airways.
You nailed it. And the Belfast team calculated that 10% of these lung cancers could be completely avoided if PM2.5 was just kept under 10 micrograms per cubic meter.
Just 10 micrograms.
Yeah. We are talking about 137 entirely preventable lung cancers every single year, just in a small population like Northern Ireland.
If this microscopic rust is accumulating silently for decades, causing epigenetics to go haywire and driving up cancer rates by 79% in clean areas, I mean, we are essentially flying blind.
We really are. By the time a tumor shows up on an X-ray, the damage has been done.
We need a way to see the rust before the engine actually breaks.
And that requirement for an early warning system brings us to our final paper, a December 2025 paper by Mariam Jisam Hassan and her team.
Right.
They are focusing on AI-driven genomic modeling to solve this exact problem.
Now, AI is the buzzword of the decade, but using it to read our DNA feels like something out of science fiction. The paper mentions they're using high-throughput sequencing combined with machine learning. Let's pause there. High-throughput sequencing. Is this like when I spit in a tube and send it off to a commercial company to find out my ancestry? Oh, it is light years beyond a commercial ancestry swab. A standard commercial test is looking at a few predefined genetic markers, the letters of your DNA.
Okay.
High-throughput sequencing in this context is rapidly reading millions, sometimes billions, of those epigenetic markers we talked about.
Wow.
It's scanning the entire Marvel movie script and noting exactly where every single stop sign has been placed and how tightly every single spool of thread is wound.
That is an incomprehensible amount of data for a human to look at, which I guess is where the AI comes in.
Exactly.
The paper mentions algorithms like XGBoost and random forests. Now, I'm not a data scientist, but a random forest sounds like a lumberjack video game. How does that actually work?
That's funny. So think of a single decision tree in machine learning like a human doctor looking at your symptoms, answering a series of yes or no questions, and arriving at a diagnosis.
Okay, that makes sense. But a single tree can be prone to errors. A random forest algorithm is like assembling a massive council of thousands of different doctors.
Oh, I see.
Each doctor is given a slightly different subset of your genomic data. They all look for patterns, they all make a prediction, and then the algorithm averages out their votes to make a final, highly accurate decision.
So the algorithm takes those billions of epigenetic data points and looks for the hidden patterns of cellular rust.
Precisely.
This sounds exactly like the precogs in the movie Minority Report.
Oh, the psychics who can see a crime before it actually happens so the authorities can intervene.
Yes. This AI is basically acting like a medical precog. It's an early warning system that catches the crime of epigenetic damage long before the actual disease ever manifests.
It's a great comparison because by the time a patient develops physiological symptoms of adenocarcinoma, the epigenetic formatting errors have been compounding for years.
Right.
These machine learning models are being trained to identify the specific signatures of PM2.5 damage. They can forecast those epigenetic modifications incredibly early.
So what does this all mean? Like, what's the end game here for you and me? Are we looking at a future where I go to my annual physical, give a blood sample, the lab runs it through a random forest algorithm, and my doctor says, your cellular rust level from traffic pollution is getting dangerously high. You need to install a HEPA filter in your bedroom immediately.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the exact frontier of personalized predictive medicine. We will no longer treat the environment as just a generic macro-level public health issue.
It becomes personal.
Exactly. We will treat your localized environment as a highly personalized medical variable. If the AI detects that your specific epigenetic switches are being flipped by PM2.5, your physician can intervene with targeted epigenetic therapies, lifestyle alterations, or environmental recommendations decades before pathology develops.
We're moving from reactive medicine, like waiting for the broken arm to show up on the x-ray so we can put a cast on it, to proactive medicine, where we reinforce the bone before you even fall down.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it also arms policymakers with undeniable data.
Oh, true. If a city council is debating whether to route heavy diesel traffic away from a residential neighborhood, and AI modeling can definitively prove exactly how the current traffic pollution is fundamentally altering the DNA formatting of the local residents.
Then environmental remediation becomes a biological imperative rather than just a zoning debate.
Exactly.
Man, we have covered a massive amount of incredibly dense ground today. Let's distill the key takeaways we've pulled from these sources in the deep dive lab today. Number one, PM2.5 pollution is not just irritating dust that makes you cough.
No, it acts like a rogue Hollywood director.
Right, sneaking past our physical defenses and altering our epigenetic script through oxidative stress, which is a microscopic chemical rust that places stop signs on our DNA and hides critical genes.
And number two, this invisible threat is not restricted to heavily polluted industrial zones.
Like we saw with the Shire.
Right. High resolution, 1-kilometer mapping in relatively pristine areas like Northern Ireland reveals that PM2.5 significantly boosts lung cancer risks, particularly adenocarcinoma. And due to a mix of biological factors like endogenous estrogen and demographic realities, this invisible threat has a shocking, disproportionate impact on women.
And finally, number three, we are developing the tools to fight back. Machine learning algorithms and AI are becoming our medical crystal balls.
By rapidly sequencing billions of epigenetic markers, these systems act as an early warning system, predicting cellular damage before it manifests as illness.
When you synthesize all of this research, the overarching narrative is profound. The air we breathe is a deeply intimate component of our biology. It interacts dynamically with our DNA every single second of the day.
It completely reorients the concept of environmentalism. Protecting the environment isn't just about preserving a distant rainforest or saving an endangered species.
No, it is highly personalized preventative healthcare. Clean air is quite literally preventative medicine.
The boundary between what is outside of our bodies and what is inside our cells is practically non-existent.
It really is.
Well, I want to thank you for pulling up a chair and spending time in the Deep Dive Lab with us today. If you enjoyed this journey into the invisible forces shaping our health, hit that subscribe button to keep exploring the incredible world around us.
The deeper we look into the microscopic world, the more we realize how connected everything truly is.
It's so true. Now, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Earlier, we mentioned that the researchers in Mexico pointed out these epigenetic changes, these mislaid stop signs and tightly wound spools, are potentially reversible.
Right, epigenetics is written in pencil, not pen.
Exactly. So if our environment can subtly rewrite our genetic software for the worse with every breath of polluted air, could purposefully designing cleaner, hyperoxygenated environments eventually rewind the clock?
Oh, wow.
Could the very act of breathing perfectly clean air actively reprogram ourselves back to perfect health? Think about that the next time you take one of those 20,000 involuntary daily breaths.